just want to make a couple open remarks, and then I'll ask Senator Taranto to make remarks as well. The purpose of this hearing today is to discuss and talk about the sexual abuse cases that were recently reported by the media. Some of the highlights, just for the record, included teachers and principals that failed to alert child welfare investigators or police when students reported abuse, this in despite of a state-mandated reported law. School employees subjected student victims to repeated interrogations. Ineffective background checks exposed students to educators with criminal convictions. CPS does not track child abuse by its employees in a consistent or formal manner. Little to no support for victims of sexual abuse who were bullied because of their abuse. And there's a conflict of interest with CPS's legal department. CPS acknowledged the district does not have a standard protocol for investigating reports of sexual misconduct. The CPS legal department was found to cut deals with problem educators to get them to resign. It also reported that lack of data makes it hard to determine the scope of the problem. Investigations show the number of sexual assault and abuse of children inside schools has not declined in recent years, this in despite of a drop in the overall enrollment in the schools. All this comes on the heels of the CPS's mishandling of special education, which resulted in the State Board of Education appointing a special monitor. This comes in the heels of reports that a large number of schools in Chicago were found to be filthy and dirty and not taken care of. This also comes in the heels of a report that came out 4 days ago of CPS's breach exposed private student data, which included the children's name, home and cell numbers, emails, and IDs. I should add that this is not the first time that this happens. It's also reported that this is again from a report that this is not the first time CPS exposed the private data of students. Students' medical conditions and dates of birth were shared by CPS in a spreadsheet back in February of last year. In 2016, a CPS employee improperly leaked students' names, addresses, and current schools to the Noble network of charter schools. Again, the purpose today is to concentrate on the sexual abuse scandal. Our hope is that by listening to testimony from the witnesses, that would help us as legislators come up with some ideas or legislation that we can introduce to make sure that we protect all the children in the state of Illinois, but especially the ones in Chicago. And with that, I'll ask my co-chair to please say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to recognize Senator Jackie Collins and Senator Tom Cullerton, who are joining us today. As a parent and an educator, I'm angry by the mistreatment that students face by abusers and insufficient administrative protocols. It is unacceptable for sexual predators to be near our children. Our children must feel safe at school, and it is our responsibilities to ensure this happens to the very best of our abilities. This bipartisan hearing is intended to give us all a broader understanding of the systematic failures that took place to guarantee we can protect our children, to enforce clear protocols for reporting abuse, background checks, and advance legislative solutions for school districts across the state to ensure our students are safe. I, along with the members of the Senate Education Committee, are committed to finding a meaningful solution that will reestablish a secure learning environment for these students and students across Illinois.
Thank you, Senator. So we're going to have 5 panels come before the committee today. And panel 1, we do have 2 of the victims of abuse at CPS. Panel 2 would be the CPS, or Chicago Public Schools. Our 3rd panel would be the State Board of Education, followed by the 4th panel, which would be DCFS and the Children's Advocacy Center. And we'll end with our 5th panel, CTU, the Chicago Teachers Union. In the past, historically, what this committee has done, especially the last 2 subject matter hearings that we had on special education, we had CPS come in last, and the reason for that, we thought it was only fair and right for them to listen to the testimony, and then be prepared to answer any questions that we might have as a result of the testimony. Unfortunately, they apparently have something else going on, and they asked that we move them up, so they'll be our second panel today. With that, I want to ask, we have two of the victims with us today, I believe. Morgan Aranda, is she here? If you can please come up. And we also have Tamara Reed. Tamara? And we also have a written testimony by Lennon Record, who's Tamara's mother. And both of you young ladies, I can tell you on my behalf, on behalf of the committee, number one, thank you for being here today. I'm a father of two daughters, and just the thought that they would have had to experience something like you did angers me, makes me very upset. So I know this is not easy, but I want you to know that you have friends in this committee, and once again, thank you for coming and meeting with us this morning. And with that, the floor is yours. Who wants to start?
Is this better?
Oh, much better, yeah.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Morgan. I'm 22. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and attend Ohio State University as a floral design and marketing major. I went to Newberry Academy for grade school, followed by Walter Payton College Prep for high school. I worked tirelessly to get the opportunity to attend Payton, one of the best in the city, state, and country. I passed my Illinois Standard Achievement Test with flying colors. I earned high grades in all of my classes. I represented Illinois at the National History Day contest with a one-woman play I wrote about the public housing crisis in Chicago, a city I love with all my heart. I remember the first time I ever stepped foot in Payton. My dad took me to their student open house right before I applied to the selective enrollment schools in the city. As soon as we arrived, I just knew that Payton was the right choice for me. Everything about the place inspired me, excited me, motivated me. I believed the next 4 years of my life would be so formative and so life-changing, and I was so excited to learn. Now, I'm sure everyone here knows the next few months did not go as planned. I'm sure you know that at age 14, world studies teacher and sexual predator Sam Bordy assaulted me twice in my school, in a place that was supposed to be safe. After these two deeply traumatizing incidents, Payton was no longer a safe place for me. The school had lost its sense of wonder and excitement, and so had I. I had never pictured myself going through this trauma in these circumstances. Bordy paid little attention to me in class, often ignoring my perpetually raised hand. He would grade my exams lower than they deserved, as if to taunt me to come speak with him about my grades. As a previous national history scholar, I was confident I knew how to engage with the materials presented to me, interpret and comprehend their significance, and display my knowledge in class through assignments and on exams. But even before the assaults, Bordy made me feel small and insignificant. He made me doubt myself in a way I never had before. Over the past 7 years, I've worked through this trauma with the help of an incredible support system, and recently through an important, empowering, and healing experience with the Tribune. But I am not here because of what Sam Bordy did to me. I'm here because of what CPS subjected me to in the months following. I'm here to shed light on the re-traumatizing, intimidating interrogations, the questions of my dignity, of my intent, of my character, after I'd been assaulted by my teacher. It took so much courage to simply report him to Payton administration. I suffered panic attacks nearly every day at school. I finally confided in my most trusted teacher. She told me I was doing the right thing, assured me that what Bordy had done was wrong, and told me that I was so strong. But Payton administration and CPS staff did not value that strength. They did not value me or my experience or my right to an education free of sexual harassment. I was questioned without any representation present, not my parents, not my lawyer. I was pulled from class to sit alone in a room with an old man who asked not how I felt or what they could do to make me feel safe in my own school again, but what I was wearing when I had been assaulted. I was embarrassed to tears to tell him I'd been wearing a skirt and tights. I felt guilty. I wonder if Bordy would have groped me if I had been wearing jeans, if he would have kissed me if I had been standing a few inches further away. Administration tore apart my story and further my will to participate in their non-protocol investigation. They nitpicked my word choice, asked me to demonstrate just how Bordy had touched me. Was it a tap or a pat? Where on your leg was it? Now that you've told your story multiple times to multiple people who have still not notified proper authorities, please write it down with the exact wording you used when you first reported the incident. Please demonstrate your trauma so that we may discern whether or not it is worth our time to seek justice for the wrongs that were done to you. That was the clear message I was getting from CPS. Do you know what it's like to be made to feel like a criminal when you were in fact the victim? All of this was enough to make me backpedal as quickly as I could. I changed my statement and watered my story down, hoping that if I pretended that what had just happened was a figment of an overactive imagination, that it would all just go away. I was not so lucky. Bordy spent much more time as my teacher before he was removed. I was forced to sit in his classroom, wondering if he knew I reported him, horrified he would confront me in front of my peers, or worse, alone. In the span of time leading up to the trial, I was not kept informed of anything. If Bordy was coming back, if he had been fired, if he knew it was me, if he was admitting to his actions. I was shuttered into the dark. I felt like I was the one under investigation. It was clear that CPS did not believe me. Or at least did not believe that Bordy's actions were violating enough to have him fired. When the trial came, Bordy sat in a room with me, 1 seat away, boring holes into the side of my head. His lawyer, appointed by the Chicago Teachers Union, a board meant to ensure that teachers have all the adequate tools to do their jobs, not protect sex predators from losing their jobs, effectively called me a liar. Her line of questioning was aggressive and intimidating. She did everything she possibly could to discredit me and my story. When my mother, who has a degree in psychology and has worked as a social worker, mentioned that I was obviously mentally affected by the events that had transpired, irritable, quiet, withdrawn, unmotivated, anxious. Bordy's lawyer wanted to subpoena my medical records to prove it because she believed my own mother unfit to make such assertions. She pointed out that I never used aggressive synonyms to describe Bordy's actions when I had very bluntly been told to be as factual as possible in my statements. After the trial, I returned to my classes, unaware of the fact that my abuser had been allowed to keep his pension. It was like nothing had ever happened. For all intents and purposes, he was rewarded for his behavior. Let me make that abundantly clear for all of you. CPS currently pays the teacher who sexually assaulted me, a man who, in his own words, felt more affection toward me than any other of his students, but claims innocence, a pension. In the wake of multiple allegations of sexual misconduct, CPS provides Sam Bordy a pension. I did not learn this fact until I worked with the Tribune. What kind of system puts their student victims on trial? What kind of mayor allows sex predators to skip background checks to serve as security guards, coaches, and teachers? How is that not of the utmost concern to the leaders of this city? I came back to Chicago today from Ohio, where I study, work, and have built a life free of Sam Bordy and CPS. I came back dropping everything to do so because I care so deeply about the city and the students coming of age in it. It should never be the responsibility of survivors to mend the system of which they fell victim. The system that has failed us so miserably, allowed sex offenders with previous records into our schools, ignored multiple complaints of sexual misconduct, ignored the stories of victims, and refused to act on our behalf for fear of causing a scene in the public eye. In a recent interview, Mayor Emanuel called upon the city for suggestions to stop sex crimes in our schools, unable to come up with any of his own. In the meantime, it is absolutely necessary that we complete new, thorough background checks on all CPS staff as quickly as possible, eliminate any and all staff with previous sexual criminal history, and handle all sexual misconduct cases in the future with strict adherence to the protocols in place. You do no service to your students by conducting your own Holmesian interviews in conference rooms and front offices. It is traumatizing, it is intimidating, and ultimately interferes with the protocol that has been put in place for good reason. I will not be intimidated or belittled or quieted or shamed any longer. I ache for my fellow survivors and hope they all find the same peace and strength I've found after the better part of a decade. I was deeply failed by a school and teachers I trusted and admired. At 14, I believed these intelligent and compassionate adults would put my best interests first, and they didn't. So I'm here today in front of you asking you to advocate for all the other students, your children, who love school as much as I once did. Make it a safe place for them because it never was for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. I know it wasn't easy. We'll have next Tamara read, and then we'll open it up for questions from the committee. Thank you.
I would like to read my mother's
Hey,
statement first.
Tamara, can you make sure that's
Okay. Hello?
okay? Thank you.
I'm reading my mother's statement first. As a parent and child care provider, the horror I faced 3 years ago was almost surreal. Even more so because the people I trusted not only to provide my child with an education, but to protect her failed to act on policy and procedure that were put into place by the laws and Department of Children and Family Services, which is to report any suspicion of abuse. Instead, when the teacher was made aware of the abuse, not only did she conduct her own investigation with the aid of the principal and vice principal, but she notified the perpetrator, the substitute teacher, and his mother. The following day, I was bombarded by accusatory questions from the principal. At no time was the police called. It wasn't until the actions as a horrified parent became too much to bear, then and only then was the police called. And not even by the school, the call was placed by my daughter's father, Antoine Deshawn Triplett. Then and only then, staff made their phone call to CPS headquarters. Then and only then did I feel the right actions were finally being done for the victim, my daughter, Tamara Reed. They, the teacher and staff, were not concerned with conducting an investigation for the actions their colleague, whose mother is also an esteemed teacher at the school. Instead, they were more interested in painting my child to be some consenting adult through the line of questions. The first question hit me like a wrecking ball, seeking to destroy the foundation of my relationship with Tamara. Did you know about the relationship between Mr. Banks and Tamara? The principal asked. The second question seemed to seek and destroy any foundation that was left after the first. How is Tamara's behavior? All the while, no one presented me with the key evidence that will attest to the crime. I wouldn't answer their questions. I became enraged with anger and demanded to see the phone. When it was finally brought to me and I was able to read the messages, I was horrified at many things. Of course, the obvious being that this substitute teacher is a predator and he made my baby his prey. And the second horror was that I was sitting in a room with professionals who seemed to be blind to nepotistic culture in school. Mandated reporter training and certification is not an option in the state of Illinois. It is the law. It is a policy put into procedure to protect all children. There is no clause to investigate these suspicions on your own. It simply requires the teacher to call the hotline and let the proper authorities do their job and investigate the abuse. Where is the phone call for my daughter? The phone call I received the day before, after school hours, wasn't enough, especially since they literally were holding evidence in the palm of their hands. They should have called the police. Schools within the state of Illinois must know that they do not supersede the laws in which they are governed. CPS should take the same approach for teachers who work outside the scope of the policies and procedures as they do with children who exhibit signs of aggressive bullying, zero tolerance. Where were the crisis teams or just a child psychologist, not just for the benefit of my daughter, but all the children? The support was needed for them as well to understand the gravity of what has taken place, to understand what being a victim of sexual abuse is. Instead, the children were left to their own imagination and began to assault my daughter with their words. Teachers who once thought her as a light began to treat her as a stain on the school. The victim, my baby, was victimized twice. Sorry. My name is Tamara, and Mr. Banks was my substitute teacher of my 8th grade year. Originally, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this, and in some ways I argued with myself it wasn't worth the emotional turmoil of having to pull myself back into the depths of my grief. But the impact of everything that happened to me that year have been devastating, profound, and far-reaching. They have impacted every area of my life and every part of myself. My life and mine has shifted, and to this day, I continue to be held back and limited in my life because of what happened. After everything, I began to fall into a deep depression. Ever since, I attend Lane Tech now, but I don't apply myself in school as I once used to. However, my school career is not the only thing that has suffered as a consequence of this and the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. I have also lost my social life. Before what happened, I had an active, vibrant social life, spending time with friends, going out, socializing. These were things I took completely for granted. They were a normal and completely unremarkable part of my life. This is no longer the case. Since then, I have lost my social life, and before what happened, it was normal and completely unremarkable. And the inability to socialize freely and regularly, I always isolate myself from others as a wall of protection. So much of my life revolves around negotiating the impact of what had happened to me, coping with post-traumatic stress, and trying to keep myself safe and well. All this takes up time and energy. Time and energy which prior to all would have gone to my schoolwork and social life. This event robbed me of my confidence and self-esteem. My dignity, my self-respect have all been compromised as a result of the crime carried out against me. My faith in myself and my faith in the world have been decimated. I struggle to believe I have anything to offer my friends anymore. I am not the person I was before the assault. And I will never be the same as a result of what has been done to me. I am afraid I cannot live up to the expectations of those who knew me before. I struggle to connect with people and to trust them. I constantly wonder if the people around me mean well or mean me harm. I struggle to find the energy on so many days to fight through the difficulties of this trauma that has been created for me and reach out to others. Solitude and isolation too often seem like the safest option, and so social isolation has become yet another reality of life for me since. Not a day goes by when what was done to me does not interfere with my life or limit the life I lead in some way. It has cost me profoundly in many ways, and it has set my life on a completely different course from the one it would have taken had I not been preyed on the way I was. I have lost so much, and so many of those losses cut right to the core of who I am and can never be undone. Thank you.
I can't thank you both enough. I know it's not easy, and it's really upsetting that this even happened to you. I mean, you go to school, your parents are hoping that you're safe, and you go there to just do what you're supposed to do, and you did not deserve this. But I'm sure hoping that after we're done today, that at least the General Assembly comes up with some kind of ideas or legislation that hopefully will prevent this in the future. But I can't thank you enough. A couple of quick questions. Let me start with you, Morgan. Can you briefly or talk about the interview process? So you said that you were interviewed by the State of Chicago's lawyers or CPS lawyers. To me, they're all one and the same. Where did the interview take place?
So when my teacher took me down to the front office, there was an initial interview in the front office of Peyton. There were a couple following interviews on the following days in various rooms of the office. I was pulled out of class where I was learning to give the same statement that I'd already given. And, asked what I was wearing, which was the most insane question you could possibly ask a 14-year-old who'd just been assaulted by a teacher. And I was alone in a room with closed doors with a man who was part of Peyton administration, which I also thought was very poor choice. And that happened so often that I didn't want to report it anymore. I didn't want anything to happen.
So there were several interviews
Several.
during the course of what period of time?
Weeks,
Weeks,
week
okay.
or two.
And there were different individuals interviewing you.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Mike Hermes 2 or 3 times. He was an acting or assistant principal at Peyton. So yeah, I was giving the same statements over and over to the same group of people who had already heard it.
So
And then
you,
writing it down for the same group of people who had already heard it.
so you had people who worked at the school,
Yes.
And did you also say that there were attorneys from the city of Chicago or from CPS?
That was during the trial. There was also a CPS
Okay.
investigator. That was who pulled me out of class to talk to. And that was when, my parents weren't called. I had no one else with me, not even a woman. Like a woman's presence in the room would have been so much better, and there was just nothing.
Did they always identify themselves as to who they were?
Yeah.
Or who they represented?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Tamara, in your case, you were interviewed at the school too?
Yes.
Can you talk a bit about that? What was that like? Who interviewed you?
Well, the day they called my mom, my teacher, she pulled me out of class and she talked to me about it, and she made it seem like it was my fault. Like, immediately what she said, if you wanted to talk to somebody 14 years older than you, then you could have done so much better. And like right then and there, like I didn't want to go home and tell my mom, because that wasn't the case. And the next day, I wasn't even in the room when they were doing the interview at first, but they were asking my mom about my behavior. And when I finally came in, they were asking me about Mr. Banks and did I come on to him, or about like what I wear. But we wear a school uniform, and we had already had conflict with the school because of that, because at that school we can only wear skirts in the winter, even in the winter. And I have an illness where I have to wear pants because it's so cold. And one day they made me change into a skirt, and it was this short to where if I bent over, you could see my rear.
Thank you. Do we have members from the Children's Advocacy Center here? I know they're testifying, so please remember this conversation, because if you can add and tell us what your thoughts are in terms of the interviewing process that was followed in this case. So thank you. Senator Tarrant.
First, I need to add Senator Lightford to our roll.
And Representative Lilly to the roll.
Ladies, I just want to take the time to thank you for your courage here today. I know this was very difficult, and I apologize. As I said, I'm a former educator, and this should never happen to our students. We should demand better as a state. So again, thank you for your courage in being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have questions from the committee. We'll start with Senator Resson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Chairman. Good morning. Thank you for your very powerful and compelling testimony this morning. I'd like to go back first to when you reported this incident, and can you walk me through specifically who you reached out to tell about this episode, and then afterwards, when the school was notified of what was happening, did they provide you with an advocate or someone to help you through this process?
Yeah, so I told a trusted teacher. She immediately took me to the front office to speak to principals. She sat in the room with me. I spoke to the people that were there at the time, which I believe were the principal and the vice principal. I recounted my story. There was no counselor involved. There was no advocate called. DCFS was never called. They said that they called DCFS, and they never did.
I'm just curious, were they taking notes? What
Yeah,
were they doing?
they were taking notes. They were talking amongst themselves. They were pretty much asking the same questions over and over. Again, a lot more of the demonstrating of the touch. And then in the consequent interviews, it was the same questions. And then they would nitpick what word I chose to describe it, as if, I'm going to say the same thing every time. So I got this image in my head that, I should probably start writing down everything I say, just to make sure that I don't cross myself or make myself look less believable.
So after the first meeting, the teacher brings you to speak with the principal. and you told them what happened. Then what happened next? Who did you speak to next?
I believe, and this was 7 years ago, so it's kind of hard to recall exactly what the time period was, but I believe I talked to the CPS investigator next. And after that, it would have been Mike Hermes again.
And I'm sorry, who?
Mike Hermes, he was one of the assistant principals at Peyton.
Okay, and then after you spoke with the CPS investigator,
Yeah.
and then the other gentleman at Peyton, who did you speak with afterwards? I'm just trying to get a feel for a timeline and the process that you went through.
I mean, so all of those interviews and all of those questions are answered in all of the files that are now open to the public. But again, to the best of my knowledge, I spoke multiple times with principals and vice principals, with the CPS investigator, who was incredibly intimidating. And then there was a trial portion where I was in the room with my lawyer, my mom, Bordy's lawyer, and then like a judge figure. I don't know if judge is the right word.
So this whole time you went through this process, you really didn't have an advocate
No,
in the
not
room
at
or a
all.
counselor helping you through the
No.
process to
No.
explain what's going on?
Peyton had notoriously poor counseling services, I think is a nice way of putting it. And those people never reached out to me. I mean, it was clear that I was failing my classes. I was failing exams. I was a really
So there's
good-
red flags going up everywhere.
Yeah,
Right.
there was no doubt in anybody's mind that I was suffering. And, their answer was like, well, have fun in world studies with Bordy. Like,
Right.
and nobody, I knew nothing. I knew nothing. Nobody was like, just so you know, this is the amount of time before Bordy's going to be removed. Or just so you know, we can put you in a different class with a different teacher.
And that was their answer?
Yeah, they would just go to class,
Okay.
and he's going to disappear one day, and you're not going to know why.
Again, thank you for telling your story.
Yep.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we have Representative McSweeney.
Morgan and Tamara, you two are heroes, and thank you very much for being here today. You were wronged. You are helping to bring about positive change now. You're taking your bad experience, and as the senator said, we owe you an apology. Apology on behalf of the state of Illinois, the CPS. You have absolutely done so much good work in your life, and you're going to continue. But what I really want to applaud you for, too, is by being here today, you're going to change lives. You're going to make sure that this never happens again. This legislative panel, these two chairpersons are committed to filing legislation as we have to make this go away in the future to a large extent. The Chicago Tribune obviously has done excellent reporting on this, and you had a very fair point that some people don't have solutions. We've filed a bill now. We've got very detailed solutions that'll be worked on, that'll be added on. But I'd ask you to hopefully stay involved in the process and the legislation, because you two are really heroes. And I asked just for each of you, if there's one thing, and we will do many things, I promise, especially on this whole issue of questioning and investigations and protections, if there's one change in a law that you think would have the biggest benefit to make sure that this never happens again, and there will be multiple, and we're working on that, can you please share that with us, your detailed thoughts? Because as the heroes that you are and for coming forth today, you're going to help bring positive change in this state.
I would say for one law, the teacher, administrator, whoever that the assault is reported to, that if they do not immediately report it and they decide to do their own private investigation, that they face some type of consequence, like some type of suspension or something, because I'm pretty sure if that was put into place, my teacher, my principal, they would have never wanted to have their own private investigation and deny to my mother calling the police. She had to call the police herself before they even did anything. If they were to face some type of consequence and they knew that it was in place, that would have never happened.
So I think you need to stop hiring sex predators, and I think you need to fire sex predators, and I think you need to not pay sex predators a pension. I think that with all of the resources that CPS must have available, it is so overwhelmingly easy to do a background check. And I can't imagine a situation in which you like interview a teacher, get really excited to hire them, and then you're like, do we really need to do that background check? Really? You know, and I think that allowing people who prey on children to work in a system that is specifically designed to educate children is ridiculous.
And let me just say it again, you're heroes. You're going to change lives, and thank you for being here today, and this will be taken care of, I promise.
Thank you. Tamara, did you say your mom had to call the police?
Well, my dad did, but yes, like, I wasn't in the room when they were doing the interview, but in the office, you can hear my mom yelling, like, why haven't you guys called the police? Call the police. Like, she was yelling to where people in the lunchroom could hear her, and it was my dad who called the police.
Okay, but the school never called the police. You both made statements that DCFS was not contacted?
It wasn't until later, after the police arrived, they decided to contact DCFS.
Okay, after the fact.
Yes.
And one of you said that you were asked what you were wearing. Who was that? Okay,
I think you were questioned as well as
Yeah,
to what
I
you wore.
was, but it was like talking about, they thought that I wore pants to school so they could purposely give me a skirt, but it was really because I was cold, and when I'm in cold areas, my veins shrink and I get put in a lot of pain. They weren't allowing me as a girl to wear pants to school. They would only allow us to wear skirts. And my mom was talking about that too, because she was saying, you guys are a public school. How are you guys only gonna let girls wear skirts?
And what school is that?
Robert A. Black.
Okay, thank you. Representative Willis, followed by Collins and Flowers.
Thank you. Ladies, thank you so much for being so brave to share your story. I want to sort of piggyback on what Chairman Crespo said. At what point in the investigation did the police actually get involved or get called? Tamara, you said it was when your parents were there at the interview?
Yes.
So the school never did, so was that in the very beginning, like the first day when you brought it up, or did it take a while?
That was the second day.
It waited till the second day?
The substitute teacher was there, and my teacher, she told me to go home, and she said she'll talk to the substitute. I was young, I didn't know that that was wrong, so she talked to the substitute, told him, hey, you should go, and then like 7 o'clock that night, they called my mom telling her she needs to come in.
And it wasn't until your parents demanded that the police got called that they actually got involved in this. And what about you, Morgan?
The cops were never called.
The police were never called?
No.
So they were never involved in,
Correct.
okay, that's inconceivable. I can't imagine that going through. That's just absolutely horrible on that aspect. Throughout all of this, was there a time when they assured you that the teacher would not be back in the school, or that you wouldn't see this? Or Morgan, you stated you had to still go to class for quite a while with the same teacher in there, and they gave you no options, and they never pulled the teacher out of the classroom?
Yes.
And Tamara, did that substitute teacher ever come back to your school that you're aware of during this?
No,
Okay.
no.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies. I feel for you. I, again, apologize that you had to be put in this situation, and we must do better so that other young people do not have this happen to them. And we'll work on that.
Senator Collins.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Tamara and Morgan. And I just want to reiterate what's already been said. You're so courageous in your bravery. We really appreciate it. But my concern is that I don't think apologies are enough, because you have been psychologically harmed. And I think as a responsibility for CPS, and they're going to come to the table next, is that we already have laws on the books that were violated. So I don't even know how I can trust any other laws that might be placed on the books, Because if they're not enacted or implemented, what's it to say once the media spotlight is off the issue, we would be confronted with the same problem. So I do want to ask you something, Morgan. You mentioned in your statement that a CTU lawyer was also involved,
Yeah, she was Bordy's lawyer.
and she raised the issue of whether or not, and she was interrogating you with the same sort of demeanor that the CPS lawyers
Yes.
were interrogating you, victimizing you again, putting you under the same stress.
Yep.
So that's good to know. When CTU comes to the table, I would like to address that, because if we're all in this endeavor to protect our children, I think it has been systemic failure by all adults all around, and it needs to be addressed. Thank you so much for your bravery.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Flowers.
First of all, ladies, I would like to also extend my sincere apology for violating your trust. Because I know when your parents sent you to school each and every day, they really thought that they were sending you to a safe place because of the handbook, if for no other reason. The policy of CPS says that the environment in which you are to be in is supposed to be safe and adequate for your education. And we violated that. And I want to say to you, I want to thank you for your tenacity and your strength to make sure that this never, ever happen again. And I want to say to both of you that every one of those adults that work for CPS, every last one of them failed you. The mayor of the city of Chicago failed you. The CEO of CPS failed you. The board that works for CPS failed you. And anyone else that came in contact that you told, because you complied with the law. And it says failure to notify is a violation of a mandated reported law. And failure to report is a class 4 felony. In some cases, if you do it a couple times, there's 1 to 3 years with a $25,000 fine. And for a class 3 felony is 2 to 5 years with a $25,000 fine. And furthermore, for those teachers and other administrators that did not call the police or seek help for you, they too are involved with obstructing of justice, according to state law. And so I'm so sorry that you had to sit in front of your predator every day. And had you tried to leave that school, you would have been marked absent, you would have had some type of tardy, there would have been something negative put in each one of you all's files. And there would have been nothing that you could do about it. There was no recourse, there was nobody in that entire system that your parents could go to and that you could go to that tried to help you. And as far as I'm concerned, this system is broken and everyone in it needs to be fired. But I did have one other question. Have the mayor or anyone from CPS since then, since your story has been in the newspaper, have anyone reached out to you to say, we're sorry?
Of course not.
Has anyone tried to offer you any guidance? I mean, because I read where Mrs. Jackson was saying how she was sickened when she heard about it.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure, and she's such a mother bear, and she wants to protect all of her little cubs. She had to reach out to you and say something since it was in the newspaper.
Nope.
Not at all. That's what my mother was talking about.
You've got no counseling, no offer for counseling. Nothing.
And I'm not in the CPS system still, but she is, and I think that's ridiculous.
And you were in the 8th grade?
Yes.
You were in the 8th grade. I'm sorry, but I'm so sorry. And the saddest part about it, there's some other children out there. I've heard from quite a few. They're older, and they don't want to come forward. So I know, I want to thank you again for having the strength and the wisdom and the tenacity to do so. And may God bless you. And I just want to say that the women organizations out there, they should be rallying behind you. You are a good example of a Me Too. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Flowers. I'm glad you brought up the mayor of Chicago. He did, I'm looking at a Chicago Tribune article where he takes responsibility, but not the blame for CPS sex scandal. He did apologize. I'm not sure what for. But one of the comments that was made, Representative Flowers, was that what took him so long to even act on it? According to this article, the FOIA request put the city of Chicago on the clock. They had these the last 5 months and never responded and just reacted. And I can share with you, that's the same thing we learned during the hearings that we had on special education, where a letter was sent to the mayor of Chicago back in November of 2016, telling him that there was an issue with special education in the city of Chicago. And there was no response. No response until the advocacy groups and we had subject matter hearings put pressure. The State Board of Education, for the first time, had what they call a public inquiry, and pretty much are now taking over special education for the city of Chicago. So I put that for a comment. Next we have...
I'm sorry, Representative Crespo, I just want to clarify something because you called my name in debate. And I just want to say that I too, I take advantage of everything. I too read where the mayor called himself apologizing, and his quote is, "I think all adults offer apology. I offer my apology." And like you said, to whom? To whom does he offer? Did he extend to the parents, the taxpayers, the children? No, he did not. So thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Senators Cullerton, followed by Senator Lightford.
First, Tamara, Morgan, thank you very much for being here today. This is, I'm incredibly impressed with your ability to sit here and talk to us, and I thank you for this. I want to reiterate the point that to get to the level to fix this is, your testimony is going to be extremely helpful and extremely empowering. We had talked earlier about advocates being brought up. I want to know if when you went in to talk to or deal with the administration, did anybody offer you any rights? Did you have any rights given to you, like you didn't have to answer questions?
No.
No.
At any point, did anybody say, do you have a lawyer present?
Nope.
And I know, Tamara, they had talked about bringing your mother in first. Morgan, when did they actually decide to talk to your parents?
I had told my mom, and on my own before I went to go talk to administration, and she really wanted to go talk to someone in the office, and I had begged her not to because I already just wanted the whole thing to go away. But specifically in the case of the CPS investigator coming and pulling me out of class, I was not told that I didn't have to be there. I was not told that I could leave. I was not told that my mom was coming. I was not told that she was called. There was no one representing me. There was no one on my side. And truly, that man was not on my side. That man wanted to see whether or not I was lying, whether or not I was, worth making a fuss about. But he wasn't there to get the facts and make sure that he had all the information he needed to conduct a thorough investigation against Bordy. He was there conducting an investigation on me.
Okay. And Tamara, you were pulled out of a classroom and into a hallway on your initial discussion by another teacher?
Yes.
Okay, so at any point did that teacher say, we should talk to a lawyer, we should talk to anybody prior to going
No,
forward?
and the meeting the next day, she didn't even want me to bring my mother because she said that my mother can be a bit overzealous about me. So she asked me if I could bring or call, if I had a number that somebody else that wasn't my mother, possibly a cousin or auntie. And I had told her, no, I have to tell my mother.
Right.
She's gonna find out either way.
Okay. Do you think that would have helped, having somebody there, anybody, even beyond an advocate, a lawyer, somebody who understood legal process, that you don't have to answer questions
Yeah.
when questioned in that nature, and you don't have to step forward, and you don't have to be subject to countless interviews without some type of representation? Would that have been helpful?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Again, I want to reiterate everybody's sentiment up here. I apologize that you went through this, but understand you being brave enough to come forward is going to hopefully make this not occur to anyone else again, and not just in CPS, but throughout our entire state. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Senator. Next, Senator Lightford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies, thank you so much for coming before us. And I arrived a little later, also addressing the same issues that we're talking about today, lack of strong policies that protect young people. One of the things I wanted to know is you mentioned that you're not in CPS schools.
I'm 22. That's why.
Okay, but when the incident happened, were you a CPS
Yes,
student at that
I
time?
attended Peyton
Okay,
downtown.
so I just want to know from the chairman, do we have any students here who are not CPS students? Because I'm almost certain that this is an incident that only happened in CPS schools. And as we're legislators for the state, I know that we should look forward to the interests and the protection of kids across the state.
Yeah.
And a policy that we come up to support young people is a policy that's going to support children outside of Chicago as well. So I just wanted to know, are we just only aimed and focused on CPS, or are we talking about school districts across the state?
So in my opening remarks, Senator, I had mentioned that our goal is to look at the welfare of students throughout the entire state. But today specifically, we're talking about the CPS students, and we reached out to these two young ladies, my staff did, in response to the articles that came out of CPS. But we did say earlier on that our intention is to revisit policies as how they impact students throughout all 852 school districts.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, ladies.
Representative Pritchard.
Thank you, ladies, for the bravery you have in bringing forth and living with the tragedy. Mr. Chairman, I would also suggest that as we talk further with other school districts around the state, we really look at what might be the best practices for dealing with these kinds of situations. I have an FSA, a Family Service Agency Advocacy Center in my district that deals with these kinds of issues. And there is one interview with all of the interested parties there so that the victim doesn't have to go through and give their statement again and again and again. It's unimaginable that we don't use the best practices possible to deal with a tragedy and help the victim get on with their life and try to reconstruct their life. So, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we look at what are some of those best practices from other agencies that can be brought to bear in our school districts to avoid this kind of situation.
Thank you, Representative. Just for the record, I did reach out to the Children's Advocacy Center in Chicago and several others. I sat on the board for Northwest Children's Advocacy Center, and I think they do have the best practice in place right now. There's a county protocol, which we'll talk about later on, that I think had we applied that protocol to CPS, we wouldn't be here today. So I've invited both Sharber Vet, who's with the Children's Advocacy Center of Chicago, and Kim Maggioncino, who's Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center of Illinois. I've talked to both of them, and I think they're going to really give us some kind of ideas how we should move forward. My personal feeling is that they should be the point person on these investigations. That's their core competency. They know how to conduct interviews, and they work very well with the other stakeholders or parties that should be involved in this. So we're going to hear from them later on, and I'm really interested in finding out their observations, critiques on what CPS has done so far. I also understand that Dr. Jackson has reached out to them, and they've entered some kind of an agreement moving forward. Whether that agreement goes far enough or not, we can have that conversation moving forward. But once again, we're talking about CPS today because obviously it's in the news, but we do have 852 school districts. There's one out near me in Carpentersville, and we'll talk about that later. School District 300, which you know, also had an incident of sexual abuse. So obviously it's not only Chicago. And I think our goal is to come up with policies and procedures that will deal with this to protect students throughout the entire state. But what we've seen in Chicago at CPS, in the heels of all the other issues with special education, with dirty schools and things like that, I think it just raises more questions. I have Representative Lilly for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize, I didn't hear your entire testimony. I did have a press conference and made my way over here. I have one question. And any time during this tragedy that you've been through, did anyone offer you counseling services?
No, it wasn't until I transferred to Lane Tech and my mother found a counselor there. She made it aware of what happened, that I was put in a trauma support group my freshman year at Lane Tech. But 8th grade year, nothing at all. I hid in the basement until like 8th grade graduation. So, yeah.
I am so sorry to hear that. When we have professionals and services available to you at the school. Megan?
There were no
I'm sorry,
services
Morgan, I'm
offered
sorry.
to me either.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know, whatever legislation we put in place, it needs to have embedded in there services for the victims who are going through these tragedies. It should not be omitted. They need support to get through the trauma, and often they have to do it by themselves and end up on the wrong track. So I would ask that we think about that, and I can offer legislation in that respect. Thank you for your testimony, your concern for others, and thank you for being here today. God bless you.
Thank you, Representative McAuliffe.
Yes, thank you for your courage. I don't know if you're going to stay here and hear the rest of the testimony, so I just wanted to thank you for coming here. As a parent, dropping my 2 children off today, they said, drop us at the door. I said, no, I'm taking you inside. It's a special class. When I saw one of the teachers that I respect, I felt that safety. I signed my name and gave my kids to the school that they go to. It's in the city. It's a parochial school. A few things that came to mind while I was driving here and thinking about hearing your testimony, like a background check. From what I understand, for a teacher to be, if you chose to be a teacher and you were going to work for CPS or any school, would you feel like threatened, or would you feel if someone said, we need to have you fingerprint and it's going to cost $35, do you think that would that be insulting to you, or would that make you feel better?
Of course not.
Also, by my children going to parochial school, sometimes I can go on field trips or go there and, help out with lunch and that. They had us fill out something that would go to DCFS to show that us as parents, that there's nothing wrong with us. That's something else maybe that should be statewide. Again, I don't know what the cost is. That wasn't a fingerprinting, but still just to know that other parents that are going to be there, that there's nothing wrong with, that there's nothing in the background of a parent that's also able to attend the school. So, and another point too that was brought up that was real disturbing was why they kept asking you what you're wearing. I mean, for some of you, you know, if you had to wear a uniform, you had to wear a uniform. That should not be any part of the question. The police should have been there right off the get-go. And I'm assuming that that teacher was able to keep his pension was because he's probably never been charged with anything. And that's a wrongdoing too. And that's probably why he was able to resign. I mean, we have governors of the state of Illinois that are not getting their pensions because they were convicted. And that's the way the law is. But in that case with you or with that teacher, he was able to resign, retire, whatever, and get his pension, and that's not right. So hopefully we'll be able to move forward with legislation. And again, I commend both of you for being here today because you are going to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Ma.
Thank you. I share sentiments with that my colleagues expressed, commending you for your courage coming forward and the sorrow and regret that you had to go through these horrible experiences. I was deeply troubled by all of the experiences you described, but in particular, what you just said, Tamara, about having to hide in the basement for the remainder of your 8th grade year. That just breaks my heart, and I just wanted to get a clearer idea. At what point in your 8th grade year did this incident occur, and how many months?
It happened at the end of February, so like all the way from March to June. I isolated myself from students and staff because he wasn't at the school, but his mother was.
Right.
And she would talk about me among teachers, and it wasn't like, oh, I just hearsay, like it's just hearsay. Like I literally saw her talking to my science teacher about me, and then I'm in class, in my science class, and my science teacher makes a remark. It's not direct, but everybody knows who she's talking about.
And were those relationships ever brought to light with the administrators? Did they try to address that aspect of your trauma in any way?
No.
And with your experience, Morgan, you said that you were 14 at the time, and you were subjected to being in the same classroom and not told that you could request a different teacher or remove yourself from that situation. And so was that in your sophomore year?
That was my freshman year.
Or your freshman year?
Mhm.
I'm just really floored by the fact that the administration would allow this to happen. And, I really hope that the procedures that are the policies that are put into place can bring about a culture change so that everyone knows that it's not appropriate to subject you to questions repeatedly and to ask about what you were wearing, and even the uniform policy. I mean, I would hope that it could be more gender neutral so that young women are not required to wear skirts if they don't want to. But I think that the provision for some kind of independent investigation or and provision for advocacy and counseling for the victims is really critical in all of these situations. And I hope that we're able to do something so that we can provide those services for victims in the future. Hopefully, there won't be, but there won't be victims that go through this trauma in the same way. But again, I want to thank you for coming forward and sharing your testimony with us. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this pace, we will be out here by midnight. Just kidding. I can't thank you both enough. You know, all of us up here, we deal with a lot of influential people, a lot of leaders throughout the state, and I know I'm looking at two great leaders today. The fact that you were willing to step up, I know it's not easy. The fact that you're willing to come here, especially you travel all the way here to meet with us, I wish you the best. And again, and this is mentioned before, on behalf of the entire state of Illinois, we feel bad. We're sorry this happened. It should not have happened, but you should walk around with your heads up high. You guys are helping a lot of other people. So thank you very much for testifying today. Thank you.